The idea of talking about mental health, the idea of talking about traumatic experience, the idea of trying to figure out a way to move through university with the understanding that it is going to be incredibly difficult for some, and some parts of it will be incredibly difficult, and other people will sort of drift on through and not have too much. So I should introduce myself a little more. Sean Bell. I am the chaplain at Luther College. I run a program called the Multi-Faith Peer Chaplain Program. And so I have two multi-faith peer chaplains, and we're going to be running some multi-faith fluency learning things, as well as some other spiritual engagement things. It's my belief, personally, that we will do better when our whole self is accepted in the place where we're at. And I believe that pretty much most humans are spiritual in some way, whether they're part of an organized religion or not. So anyway, I think that our whole self, our spiritual health, our mental health, our intellectual health, our financial health, all of these different types of healths are all just totally linked. What I've learned in some of my research around building resiliency and about mental health is that it has a heck of a lot more to do with the practice and what you're doing as a practice of mental health, as opposed to what you're doing as an understanding of mental health. And so building resiliency is to take on the tasks of life, specifically in this case, university life. It's all about patterns and habits. And COVID has taught a lot of us that we had patterns and habits that were built into our system because we had to get to the bus on time, we had to dress up, we had to get our hair cut, we had to look normal, we had to shower. All of these things that we had to do are suddenly optional somewhat, right? Like it's like, oh, I don't need to wear pants, I'm on another Zoom meeting, so I just got to put on something that looks a little nice up top and knock the hair back just into the right position. And suddenly all those patterns were disrupted, and then also our mental health was disrupted, because a lot of these things, such as going to sleep at the same time, getting up at the same time, or doing these things that are good for us, are simply boring patterns. And so there's two things today. One is I want to talk a little bit about building resiliency and a little bit about finding the help that you need on campus as we go along. The first thing is I'd like to give a few resiliency facts. And I on the handout, I write it as also known as things that few of us are actually doing consistently. So if you're not doing all of these resiliency things, that's everybody, it's fine. It's also a bunch of incredibly obvious advice if you just stopped and gave yourself 10 minutes to think about it. And then it's also the stuff that's really hard to turn from a piece of knowledge into practice. The problem is that once you're in crisis and once you can barely open the textbook and barely read, it's kind of too late to get instant help from going for one walk, or it's too late to get one good night's sleep and that'll be fine. Everything will be fixed out. In fact, it's a cumulative thing, right? And so that's why that last week, right before the final exams, because right before final exams, all the final papers are due, and then you struggle through all the final papers, you get all the things, and there is a way to be ready for that time. But if you're not ready and you get there and you're super stressed out, basically all you can do is power through, because it's the pattern leading up to it that's going to be most important. Exercise and daily movement. If you exercise and have a minimum of 30 minutes, preferably outside, you're actually just going to quantifiably do better. If like me, you wake up some mornings and crawl downstairs and just get onto the computer and do whatever you do on the computer, and then it's noon and your hips are hurting, you're actually not doing your best work. And the time you take to actually move your body, and our mental health and our movement, it's just so connected. So if you take the time, you'll just do better. If you spend time outside, you will do better. And there's a phrase they use on the West Coast. They say, there is no such thing as bad weather. There's only bad clothing. So here we are living in Regina, the tundra, the cold. You know, a week ago, we were all complaining about the plus 35 heat. And within 6 weeks, I bet we're all complaining about the snow. And in fact, it's lovely outside, no matter how it is outside. Just dress for it and spend time outside. I had one of my peer chaplains years ago did an actual psychological honors project and quantifiably proved that spending time outside on a park bench is better than spending time inside on a couch or resting or doing other things. And so outside matters. Number 3, if you spend time in mindfulness or meditation or prayer or gratitude journaling and on a consistent and daily basis, you are simply going to do better. When you get to know your thoughts and your emotions and you observe them and embrace them, and then you say, hello, thought, I see you now. And then that one can float away. You'll do better. You can't ignore and suppress these inner feelings and thoughts and expect that you're going to thrive. And so I have tried journaling. I think my record was 3 weeks I made. I'm not a great journaler. It doesn't work out that well. As a Lutheran pastor, you're leading services. So again, the prayer part happens just because it's your job to be there. But then when I'm outside of that world, like for the whole summer, when I don't have to do it, it's much easier to just not do it. And then actually not centering, not breathing, not stopping, not pausing, all that actually starts to catch up with you. So I look forward to the patterns that are going to form after the long weekend as we get back into the rhythms of program and things keep going. Number 4, if you get 8 hours of sleep a night, you will do better. And I like to believe I can make it by on 5. You can see the bags under the eyes here. I'm running at a diminished capacity. And so as much as I'm going to say, yeah, I'm going to stay up late and work harder and get more done, the fact is, if you just rest properly, you'll be more productive during your actual work time and you will get more done. Looking ahead, if you engage in at least one community activity through the university, you're going to do better. Somebody studied this at some point. The former president of Luther always did this in his opening speech. If you take advantage of stuff that's on campus, this will engage you. You will have community. You will have a lifted spirit. You will be able to engage the work better. Maybe you'll find somebody who actually knows how to do the proper MLS citation for all of these papers you got to write, and you'll build these communities and connect that way. So if you are involved in at least one community event, you are going to better. Here's a funny thing. URSU, University Regina Students Union, has this giant budget. And guess where the budget comes from? It's your money. You all pay this little fee towards the University of Regina Students Union. And so there is pizza and events and programming. And I think there's one that has a free MacBook if you win the program or whatever. Like you've already paid for all of this stuff. You should engage with it. There I am shoulding. My men's group would be so disappointed. We don't use the word should anymore. We shouldn't should. All this shoulding. It's like, if you do this, you'll engage it. It'll be good. All right, moving on. Number 7, communicate with your professor. If you talk to your professor and become a name instead of a number, you're just going to do better. If you go and visit them and ask questions or something you don't understand, they'll pretty much give you all the information you need to pass. Like it's kind of funny. You are now an adult and you have entered into a syllabus and you're going to be talking to your instructor about what's in that syllabus and what you're supposed to be learning. And it's the weirdest thing, if you're a first year, like 5 months ago, if your teacher said, hey, let's go and meet for a coffee Friday night, that would be like creepy and weird and dumb. High school teachers don't take students out for coffee. Professors will meet you for coffee kind of whenever it's best for you. They work weird hours. They'll try to connect with you. Many of them are very interested in you trying to learn. And so if you take this sense of being an adult learner who is going to be engaged in this adult project, it's going to be very good. I see now on my list there that I forgot to talk about the syllabus, and that had to do everything with planning ahead. Number 5, yes, plan ahead, read your syllabus. There's actually no rule that says you have to hand the paper in on the last day. You can actually plan to have the paper done days early. Will any of you do this? Probably not. No, you'll all be up late at night getting it done. I get that. But the one semester I was organized enough to get false deadlines and actually finish ahead of time, I'd roll into that last week. Everyone else is like losing their mind, stressed out. I've actually finished with the resources. I've already got the paper written. It's really, really good. Again, you are an adult learner. And if you read the syllabus as a legal document and a contract that you have paid an unbelievable amount of money to take this course, and that syllabus is your contract. And if you engage it and you create your deadlines and get them done in a reasonable way, you'll just do better. I mean, you're adults now, right? The fact is, if there are 3 papers due on October 15th and you get to October 13th and you show up at my office being like, it's not fair, they put all the papers on the same day, I might, depending on how I think you'll handle it, I might say something about like, oh no, you only had 2.5 months notice to see that this was coming, and now you waited to the last minute. That's not fair. Like, it's just crazy. It's just crazy. It's all right there. You can do it. All right. Number 8, integrate and process the new information you are learning. Here's a funny thing. Lots of us believe lots of different things, and lots of us don't know why we believe those different things. Anybody from any sort of cultural or religious background that has an understanding of how the world works. For example, there are some groups of Christians who are adamant that the world is exactly 5,000 years old. And so as a youth, and you went through youth group, and you knew the world was 5,000 years old, and then you come and you take your first geology course, and you get shown all of this evidence that it seems clear the world might be older than 5,000 years old, right? And you've encountered this dissonance, right? Or you go to philosophy and you find a philosopher professor who likes to pick hot button issues and raise them up. And now you're torn up inside, and it's hard to learn when you're torn up inside. And so this is why I put this number 8 on there, is that the best learning you're going to do at university is when you integrate and process all of this new information somehow. There's room for everything that you used to believe, and there's room for all the things that you're going to believe. And somewhere along the way, you're going to have to deconstruct your childhood and reconstruct your adulthood, because you can't take everything from 14-year-old you forward. Otherwise, you're not maturing and changing and integrating all these new things that you're learning about people, about the world, about logic, about politics, all these things. And so it's actually where a lot of the fun of university is. It's just like, let it rip open and then recreate and become who you are. There's probably a lot of things you believed when you were at home because that was the only thing you could believe. And now you're free. You might be living in dorms. You might have nobody telling you to go to bed. You might have nobody telling you who you can date. You might have like all this freedom is thrown at you at the same time. And then you might have professors, and you're taking women and gender studies, and you're learning all these things about how you thought the world worked. It's just going to rip you wide open, and it's a beautiful process. So integrate everything you're learning as you go along, and you will do better. Number 9, mental health is a continuum. I wanted to just put this little slide up there, and I will shrink myself out of the way. Woo, woo, there we go. Mental health continuum model. I kind of thought for a while, oh, my head's really small here. That's weird. That mental health was kind of like you're either healthy or you're unhealthy, right? You're either broken or you're not broken, right? Like this binary kind of thinking. I had way too much binary thinking when I was younger. Yes, no, right, wrong, black, white, good, bad, all that kind of thing. And in fact, it's this spectrum of things. So mental health, you can see under the green, number 1, normal fluctuations in mood. It's normal to feel happy or sad or tired or good or bad at different times. But then if you look under the yellow one, nervous, irritability, and sadness, and then under injured, if you are always anxious or angry or have this pervasive sense of sadness, you know, there's a continuum of things going on. If you are easily enraged and excessive anxiety, panic, depressed, and mood, then it's perhaps you are experiencing a mental illness, which might have a chemical nature to it, something in the brain going on, right? Or it could be that life and trauma and everything is piled up at the same time, and that is the only way you can feel at the time. Now, will you always feel green, and is green the goal, and is there something wrong with you if you're not in the green? No, it's a spectrum of where you're at. I haven't been all green since COVID started, and even before then. I'm a dad of 4 kids. Like I don't get to live in the green section where I'm physically and socially active. It's like, no, I am too busy. I have decreased social activity, and sometimes I even avoid social activities because I am just too tired, having spent all my time and energy, right? And so the idea of introducing this now, and this continuum model will come up in different places with mental health and different places on campus. There's the Student Wellness Center. There's a webpage for mental health. The university and the Canadian Mental Health Association really believes in this model, the idea of looking at that. And so maybe when you get the handout off the UR courses, you can copy and paste that or take a look at that page. And then maybe that's part of your practice, is that in the morning, maybe once a week, you're going to check in and say where you're at. Or maybe you're going to have a friend and you'll start to use these colors. It's like, so when somebody says, hey, how are you doing today? You can say, yellow, because you're just not green today. But we, when people ask that question, we're always just like, fine. So I wonder, just so I can take a break from talking all the time, what did any of these make sense to anybody in terms of, move myself right out of the way. There we go. Just a little eyeball staring at the corner. Did anyone have anything in here that made sense to them? Did you notice something? I mean, they're all, if you stop and think about it, I know they're all very obvious, but if you stop and think about it, you also know that you don't do many of them on a consistent basis, right? Or I don't anyway. Maybe you're better off than I am. So I don't know. Did anyone have any comments so far about where we're at there? Again, like I said, I don't think any of these things are like utterly earth shattering. I wanted to show you, well, actually, let's go to this one here and we'll talk a little bit about, who are your people and what is your practice? In the handout you're going to find, I've got a bunch of apps in there, Insight Timer, Headspace, Calm.com. There are apps that will bug you. Before I broke my Apple Watch, it used to ding all the time and say, hey, now's the time to stop and breathe. And then I would push ignore, and then it would ask me again an hour later. But in fact, it's, again, science is just showing these things, right? I guess I would transition into now about a little bit about away from what is your practice, because that's going to be important, but also who are your people? What in life, it's really hard to do it all on your own. And whether you've joined a squash group or you've come to one of the multi-faith activities, or you've connected with your religious group, because I can probably find you a religious leader of whatever group you're from. Like we're a little light on rabbis and Buddhists, but I can help you connect with the Muslim Student Association, or wherever you need to connect. We can find that place, and then you can find your people, and hopefully you can find that person who listens. In the handout, I've got an article that I've given there called Holding Space and the Importance of Holding Space. And this is the complete opposite of what we're doing right now. Right now, we're looking at information and throwing ideas back and forth across the internet. But holding space would be a place where you actually answer the question, how are you, with a serious listening, and then some deeper follow-up questions, and allowing somebody to puzzle through what they're doing. So if you have a person in your life who can truly listen to you, then you're truly blessed, actually, because a lot of us don't actually have somebody that will listen to them. Have you had that experience? Like you go to somebody and say, oh man, I'm really struggling, and I just don't know if I can get this paper done by Friday. And then the person's response is to not really hear you or acknowledge your feelings, but to jump straight to like, well, you should work harder, or you should do this, or you should do that. Sort of sounds like one of those moms you see in a movie, right? And the person goes like, Mom, I broke up with my girlfriend. Well, she was no good for you anyway. You should just jump straight into some other thing. But to have actually somebody truly see you, truly listen to you, truly hold the space for you. And again, without judgment, right? Had a student come in one time, all bent out of shape about a textbook that couldn't be returned, and he wasn't sure where the money was going to come from. And it was this big thing. And then after listening, and if I had to jump straight to answering the question and saying, well, we can probably get you a refund, or we can do this, or his life had nothing to do with the textbook. His life had everything to do with kind of an overwhelm of arriving at university and having far more freedom and choice than he'd ever had in his life before. And so as I listened more deeply and held that space more deeply, it allowed him to then pick apart the ideas, right? I have people from faith groups that do this all the time, not just Christian groups, but like people will come and say, I'm really upset. I'm from Afghanistan, and my country is doing some stuff that I deeply agree with or deeply disagree with, or I'm really struggling. And if that person, in that case, they found me, and I was a place to hold their thoughts and kind of hold on to everything that they were worried about, and just let that come out. And then they were able to pick up pieces and move from there. There's a magic moment that happens when you hold space for someone. It's amazing, because somebody will come and they'll have a list of problems. And in my brain, I'm like, okay, Sean, you got a master's degree. Like you're supposed to be. Maria gave me a great little intro there about he's the guy you can talk to. It's like as if I might know stuff. I might have an answer for you. And I've actually panicked in my own brain, sort of like half an hour into deeply listening to somebody. And I'm like, oh man, I got nothing like this. The problems are complex. The person's background is so different than mine. I don't I have nothing to say to the situation. And I start to panic thinking, at some point after 20, 30 minutes, it's going to be my turn to talk, right? And so I need to somehow have some wisdom to share. And then I remind myself to also just, okay, calm down, wait for the magic. And it's happened a dozen times. Somebody will come in, for some reason they're talking to a pastor. They've never talked to a pastor before in their life. Suddenly they overshare because I'm just listening and encouraging and creating that space for them. And then there's a moment where they've dumped out all the problems, reorganized, and they can start to see their own solution. And it's not my solution, it's their solution. They got to figure out where they're going to go. And then they also realize that they've really overexposed themselves emotionally to somebody, right? And then I can feel the meeting like rapidly wrapping up as the person's like, well, thank you so much for listening. And it's been really great to be here. And I'm feeling kind of awkward that I told you so much in such a short amount of time, but I got to go, boof, and off they go. And so I truly hope you have somebody in your life who is that person for you, or that you somehow will find that within the campus community or within somewhere. One thing that the chaplaincy can offer you, I'm just going to throw up a really terrible picture here of all of my dead plants. So this is this is in the chapel, and this is what a year of COVID does when you turn your plants over to someone else to water. So in behind all the dead plants to the left, you can see a couple of green plants just behind my head there. And this is in the chapel space, and I'm standing in the corner where I have the Muslim prayer rugs. And so there's a corner there that is used often by Muslims, but there's several different traditions that kind of want to face east when they pray. And so there's kind of a space in the corner that we leave open either for kneeling on a rug or for prayer. But what we're staring at in the back right there is the big glass window that is part of the chapel. And you can see there behind the broom is all of my pillows that I finally pulled out of the room again. COVID is kind of wrapping up, and there's a rug there. And I often find students over in that corner of all different traditions are in what I call deep meditation. And by that, I mean they've fallen asleep. There's a couple of cushions there, and it's really quite comfortable. And so the chapel space itself is a place where all people are welcome to come at any time. And it's kind of funny. I worked pretty hard on the literature I would put out aside of the college or outside of the chapel. And still I have people all the time that are like, oh, am I allowed to go in there? Is it just for religious people, or is it just for like, who's that for? Is it for me? And I have to just always remind people, yes, absolutely, it is for you. And you're more than welcome there. I'm going to do a quick screen share if I'm allowed to do that. And there it is. And so that's our Luther College homepage. And if you head over here to current students, oops, get rid of that. Current students over here under chaplaincy. This will talk a little bit about chaplaincy and what it is and being here for the whole house. And the reason I brought that up is because I got a much better picture of the chapel space when it's actually kind of dressed up a little bit and not just a bunch of dead plants. And so hopefully you can see that. Hopefully you come and visit us on the second floor of the Luther College there, and there'll be a space that you can have. I like the joke that it's one of the only places on campus that you can light a candle without getting into trouble. Like, there are no open flames on campus, and that's because of like fire codes and not wanting to burn the place down. But in my chapel, I've got, well, this is one of my things. It's called a Firewall, and I'm setting this place up. I got to make it a little prettier still. But I'm going to have a bunch of candles out there and a bunch of matches. And if you see in the bottom, that's sand and one of those little rakes that you can draw on the sand. And so I'm entitling that little station Love Letters to God, right? And so my understanding is that any of us can pray to God in whatever form we want and however we want and whenever we want. And actually the sand is going to be used as a place to pause and draw. And I'm going to ask that if there's profanities used, you wipe them off for the next person, just because I'm confident God can handle the profanities. It's just that the next person might not want to see all the things. But basically there'll be this idea to pause, to come to a place of prayer, a place that is a little quieter, a place that's kind of set aside for that purpose. So what else? Any questions about the chapel space, or any of the other mental health services on campus?
What are other mental health services on campus?
I would say U of R has some excellent resources. Often people are a little, like when we're in a mental health crisis or we're feeling really down, it's not like we have like a week and a half to think about like, oh, I need help a week from now. It's like when you're feeling it, you want it now, right? And U of R does, they really do try with limited resources to be able to see anybody who walks up at any time. And sometimes that works out. Sometimes finding myself as the Luther College chaplain, or you could go over to Campion and there's Kelly Burke. She is the Campion chaplain. And so there are like some of those things. But if you look, the first one there under the U of R is Excellent Resources Counseling Services. And if you just go to, is it the wellness page, mental health hub, I think they call it on the, if you just Google search mental health hub, University of Regina, you'll get to an excellent resource there too. But that's the counseling services for kind of one-on-one counseling. The online therapy unit is an online back and forth program. And that one's really neat, that you get an intake person who gets you into the program, and then you do online cognitive-based therapy. So if you've done any psychology, cognitive-based therapy is basically where you have a list of everything and how you're feeling on one side, and then you do a bunch of exercises in the middle to test to see if those feelings are actually true, cognition as it were. And then you, at the end of it, you say, okay, was I perceiving the world correctly, or did I have misunderstandings of the world? And that can really help some people out. Under personal counseling is the section for one-on-one counseling. There's not a lot of, it's not going to be like in a TV show where you're going to go lie down on a couch and someone's going to listen to you for an hour. Like I'll do that a few times, but there's 15,000 students and only one of me, so like I can't do that to everyone. But but the idea, counseling is often kind of results based, as it were, and they're looking for the people. Again, if there's something in the chemistry or the physicality of your brain that is misfiring, or if you're built a little different than a neurotypical brain, right? The personal counseling or the counseling services will be looking for those markers, though. And actually, there's a lot of stuff through SAS Mental Health. If you happen to have such example like a dyslexia or a learning disability or an ADHD, where there is some funding available for aids. And then, of course, once you get aids to learning, and then once you get into the counseling services end of things, from there you might work with the student advocate, and you might talk to the people. For example, if you have dyslexia, there are helps for tests that you can get, right? Because basically, yeah, if you read at half the speed of the normal neurotypical person, then in fact, they will put in extra time for your tests, right? And there are all sorts of helps that way. I also say like professors, registrars, and everybody can be a real good mental health support if you can find the people that are actually listening and aren't just trying to tell you what to do. Luther Chaplaincy, luthercollege.edu. I think I showed you that web page, and some of the chaplaincies. I say under my little catchphrase, Reverend Sean Bell, here for the whole house. That's kind of what a chaplain does. I have actually no agenda whatsoever to make you become or do or be anything, but in fact want to support you. And well, as I say, it's often said pastors are to bring comfort to the afflicted and affliction to the comfortable. So if you're completely comfortable and think you know everything and everything's making perfect sense, and then, hey, it's great to get together and challenge each other with new ideas, right? But if you're really struggling and coming along, we will try and help you find where you are. The student advocate is just excellent that way as well. As I wrap up a little bit of my time here, 2:53, I just wanted to bring up this slide here, which talks a little bit about the concept of trauma, which has a lot to do with mental health. And I got some of this information I get from the Trauma movie with Gabor Mate. And I just wanted to run this definition of trauma past you, because there's an important distinction here, where it says trauma is a psychic wound that hardens you psychologically and then interferes with your ability to grow and develop. Okay, so I think we can all agree that far. Like, trauma is something that happened and you're not over it, or it's affecting you still somehow. It continues, it pains you and now you are acting out of pain. It induces fear, and now you're acting out of fear. Trauma is, and now this is the part that was revolutionary for me. Trauma is not what happens to you. It's what happens inside you as a result of what happened to you. Trauma is the scarring that makes you less flexible, more rigid, less feeling, and more defended. And so I've often wondered about that, like PTSD. Everybody doesn't go to war and everybody come back with PTSD. Some people have it, some people don't. One person, their faith in humanity is completely shattered, and maybe someone else is like, well, I kind of actually thought that like this is kind of how I expected people to act. And so they got their expectation, and then they weren't traumatized inside because their expectations weren't shattered, right? And so here we had all hoped that university would be one way, that our high school would be one way, that we would get to do that high school play or that high school trip or our high school prom. Like missing a prom to some people is like, well, whatever, stupid party, I don't care about prom. And maybe they don't, and maybe it's fine. And other people, prom was this penultimate beginning of life. It was this place where you were supposed to like launch, like all of these, I should have, I supposed to, all these things are broken. And now somehow that's still carrying along with you. So anyway, I would like to add into the conversation here, and I'll just make myself disappear completely for this. When trauma is triggered, you may regress into a primal state of fear, react aggressively, and become paralyzed and not be able to assess the level of threat. For example, and imagine every bad interaction you've had in the last year, every time you've been, walking down the street and somebody is yelling at somebody else for wearing a mask, or every time someone's yelling at the poor person who asked people to put masks on at the edge of the store, or every, all these things that happen, right? Or maybe, or like whatever it is. This is just like a crazy long list of kind of where trauma might land you, right? And again, it's in the handout. I think you're going to get that, and you're going to be able to read through it. It's a self-assessment. We don't have time to like do a trauma assessment on everybody here, right? But I to be honest, I'm on this list of things that I can see myself in a lot of these things as I go along, right? Like definitely the mood swings has been a thing. I mean, maybe that's because I got 4 kids and we've been locked in the same house for a year. So mood swings, rage, like I have temper tantrums and frequent anger. Like because we're 6 human beings trapped in a house with 2 dogs, 4 guinea pigs, and like there's a lot going on, right? And so in some ways I'm reacting normally to humans being trapped in a box together, but in another way I'm just sort of like, no, there's something bigger going on than somebody drank the rest of the milk or whatever, right? All the little things. So in some ways we blame ourselves and we shame ourselves for overreacting to certain situations. Oh, I shouldn't feel that bad. It was just somebody cut me off in traffic, right? But in fact, when you pile on all the trauma that you may have experienced all the way up to this point, maybe you're just, it's like, that camel, the straw that broke the camel's back, right? You're fully loaded, then somebody cuts you off, and then you're just like, and it all comes like pouring out, right? So I don't know, maybe make a good self-assessment on that, and think about it a little bit. And I always tell people, it's the university, I think, does have a lot of assets that are there to help you, but we can't find you, especially now with COVID. Like it's really hard to find people unless they actually reach out and actually connect, right? So I'm going to have my Tuesday 2:30 chapel time, and then I'm going to have my Tuesday 3 o'clock coffee time in the Luther cafeteria. And Lusa, I think, is going to join us. But if nobody ever came to the service and nobody ever came to the 3 o'clock birthday party or coffee time or whatever's coming through your email, like if nobody shows up and nobody says anything, then it's impossible to see people and their suffering. It used to be you could sit in the student lounge and watch people go by, and you could sort of see people that were having a really hard time and maybe even say hello. But now we're so scattered. Like, it's going to be a weird year that way. So I do hope that some of this conversation will help you build in some resiliency, or help you at least engage the topic of how you're doing it and why it works for you and what you feel you're lacking. And then also the idea of finding the help, finding the community, finding the people you need, like people that find their thing, whether it's journaling or meditation or outdoor walking. I mean, it works because it's awesome, and then you don't want to give it up, right? Like it's actually working. So after 3 weeks of journaling, if it's still painful and you hate it and you don't look forward to it, and it's like ruining your day every day that you have to do this healthy spiritual practice, like, no, stop journaling. That's clearly not the right thing. Maybe there's something in your psyche that's built to be outside, or maybe you're built to go for coffee and line up coffee dates and be extroverted with people, or, like you've got to figure it out for yourself. And there is no one size fits all at all. So But the earlier you find that thing, you find those people, then I think the easier that midterm crash at the late October, I often joke that we do the first long weekend is just this great, amazing party. And then we do programs and student activities. And then it's Thanksgiving. And everyone comes back on Tuesday after Thanksgiving and opens their syllabus for the first time and realizes there's a midterm that week. And then people start to crash and go crazy for midterms. I guess, yeah, if I was going to finish on one more piece of advice, when the check engine light comes on in the car, check it that day, get it done, right? Like if the brakes are making a horrible squealing sound, do something about that. If you're in a relationship and it's making all sorts of weird sounds and the check engine light is on, fix that sooner than later. And then in a class, I've been in classes, literally I got 3/4 of the way through and I had to admit, I do not know what's going on here, but now I'm too shy to say anything. And I'll just take my 55 if I can maybe pass somehow. But honestly, you probably could have figured out that it was making funny noises in the first couple of weeks, or you didn't understand it, or you didn't get it, or something needed to be fixed a while ago. And then you wait to the last minute and then, it's hard. Yeah. Wait, I have my other last piece of advice too. Now that you've actually gotten to know your professor and you've talked to them, and let's say there's 2 days left until a paper is due and you're not going to get it done, if you talk to the professor before the due date and say, I'm not going to get it done, what are our options here? They will often work with you. If you wait until the day after the paper is due and then go to them, with whatever story it is, you might have an actual real good excuse, but it doesn't matter because you waited until it was actually already due and done. There's actually way less they can do to help you. But if you're a week ahead of it and you're like, oh my goodness, I forgot I have all these other things, you go to the professor and say, hey, professor, I know this is due Friday at noon. Can I go Monday at noon instead? Because I see it's 5 days away, but I'm just not going to get, like if the relationship ahead of time before it's broken, it's great. And then afterwards, there's so much less they can do once the deadline is passed. So again, that relationship piece and just ask, just be in relationship. It's amazing. So if you come to me as a counselor, I'm going to deeply listen. My whole goal would be to listen and maybe do some I wonder statements and try and puzzle through it if that's where you want. But most people just need to be listened to.